says, I didn't realize that was the name for that.
Okay. He didn't know what this was.
I know what this is. I just didn't realize the name of the image macro, the name of the meme.
Well, now you do.
Now I do. The soy face. Okay.
What would millennials do without Zoomers?
What would millennials without Zoomers?
Crumble the the internet.
Well, my mama told me not to say anything nice to say. So.
Okay. Well, for those reasons.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome. We're going to do 3?
Welcome.
Ed always does 3 on the show.
Welcome
to an unauthorized caucus. It's Thursday. It's noon. It's caucus, and that's why we're here to do this. Although, full transparency, as we admitted last week as well, this is actually pre-recorded. I'm taking some time off. Mason's taking some time off. We've got a few different trips, but we wanted to make sure Thursday noon, just like you are used to. There is someone, by the way, I don't know if we mentioned last week, there is someone live watching this in the chat. So we will be interacting, at least one of us. But the video itself is actually pre-recorded. So if you wanted to talk about like the debate or something that has happened recently and we haven't quite covered it yet, we're getting there.
Right.
So
we haven't abandoned you.
Yes,
and
right.
Hopefully after this one, we should be back to our regularly scheduled programming. We'll be back with you live. You'll be looking at us at here rather than after we sit here.
Right. Absolutely. It's actually his idea that we're going to cover today. A good topic we wanted we should talk about. But let me say before we do, don't forget, wherever you are, like and subscribe. Hit that big red button if you're on YouTube, and then the little notification bell, or hit the big green button on Rumble. Share, retweet, or I forget what we haven't landed on that yet, but exit or repost it. Put it on Truth. Wherever you are, hit the share button, send this link to a friend. And most importantly, what you do and tell them to do, go to philschlafly.com, sign up for the email list. That is where you get most of good information. We'll send a resource email we do every week after the video, and you'll get notifications ahead of time, a reminder that the video is coming out. So go over to philschlafly.com, make sure you sign up and hit the like, share, and subscribe button wherever you are. Help us out and do us a favor. It'll help the algorithms and it'll help your friends, because I think we have probably enlightening and good conversations. Even if we don't land at an answer, we're still having the conversations that conservatives ought to be talking about and figuring out in this very important year. So with that in mind, what should we be thinking and talking about, Mason?
Yes, well, last week we discussed interesting European countries in Eastern Europe, and there was a little theme that kept coming up, especially with with both of them, really, of sovereignty and control of borders, and something that at this point seems totally foreign to us in the U.S. as foreigners continue to flow into our nation, which could have once maybe been sovereign. So I was thinking it'd be a good idea to kind of talk about what sovereignty means and what the point of sovereignty is and how that interacts with the existence of borders, period. And when sovereignty came to mind, I always think of Carl Schmitt, Political Theology, where he says, "Besides the state of exception." And that's always interesting to me, especially in this situation, because with sovereignty comes the ability to make decisions. And that is always distinct from the norms and what is normal. But more than anything, I started thinking, Carl Schmitt's sovereignty, and then I thought Carl Schmitt, Nomos of the Earth, where he talks about land titling and the authority within spatial situations, which he talks about in other works too. But the nomos is one of the Greek words for law, one of their many words for law, because they thought about law a lot. So instead of just our one word, they had to have a lot of different words to get into all the little details of it. But essentially, what nomos is, in the way that he means it, is kind of like an ultimate title to land, or radical title, I think is the English term. This title is the one from which all other titles of land derive their authority and legitimacy from. I have this little quote from, this is from the Osgood Hall Law Journal from, I think, some years ago, from 2004. So yes, I was a toddler, when this was written.
And I was in high school.
Yep. But the author, which this will be in the links as usual, says that nomos carries within it the scent of Moira, which, though commonly translated as fate or destiny, signifies the granting of each being of its own share. Nomos points to the primordial truth Each being is allotted its own place. It's for both its richness and concreteness that Schmidt chooses the word nomos to speak of a legal order. So I think that it's interesting that like the concept of law in Schmidt's view has packed within it this idea of placement, like where you physically are located, and a belonging in that placement. And kind of where I'm kind of wrap up this point, the conclusion I'm trying to get to is that law functioning properly, law as in nomos, functioning properly, a proper title, a proper and legitimate claim to the existence of a sovereign nation requires that people be within their right place, and in a primordial way, like he describes, like their being is set within their culture, they're part of what they are rather than just physically, but on like kind of spiritual level. And when that's not the case, then there's a pretty important component to what makes law and sovereignty what they are, period. So my point being is that if we don't have standards for our border and who is and is not within the country and who is not subject to the laws in very explicit terms, if we start adding these gray areas like we do with notice to appear migrants at the border, then essentially the entire meaning of sovereignty vanishes, because what is it at that point if there's just people running around? It's like there's a line around it, but there's nothing other than that.
And see, this is, and I mean, not to stop us from going further on our point, but just as a kind of a side note, this is why some of this stuff, these I don't know if what you would call them, deep thoughts, or going back to the real source, like philosophical considerations. This is what our founding fathers did. They considered the meaning of what it means to be a nation ruled by, law, the rule of law, what it means to be a nation, what that looks like, what it adheres to, how we structure this. I mean, when you think about it, like as you and I, as we go through our daily lives, these seem like pretty big and grandiose things a lot of the time for those of us who are just average, everyday working Americans, even if you're involved in politics. But this kind of theoretical, philosophical approach is incredibly important. And I think it's something that all of us, even the common man, like, us, we need to get back to some understanding and some reading of this. Not that we're going to have math, but it's incredibly important, because that's why we, to the point of this whole conversation, we see videos of just hordes of migrants being released in New York and people standing up and saying, no, we don't want this. And we're spending billions of dollars at a time to house every border crisis and everything else. We all have the gut reaction of this wrong, but it really is important to understand why it's wrong, why that matters, what ought to be in its place, what was set up. And you have to really kind of trace that back. So this is my plug for why all of us need to get a lot more well-versed, I think, and a lot better read in the source documents of this kind of philosophy, why this matters. Our founders were, and they were farmers and printers, and, George Washington was a surveyor. I mean, these were normal, common people. So it also kind of you start to feel a little bit of shame when you realize how much the common man then understood about a lot of these things, and we don't now, because we all just watch Netflix. I mean, I'm generalizing. I'm not accusing you. I'm certainly sucked into the world of streaming than anyone else, you, let alone our viewer of that, although you are watching this on a phone right now. That's okay. This is a good thing.
Help you on the path to enlightenment.
But anyway, I'm sorry. To put a bow on that, though, this is incredibly important. And it seems like it's outside of our grasp because we don't go this deep. But that's why this conversation we talk about the border crisis. Well, what does that relate to? It relates to sovereignty and the existence of nation states themselves and why that matters and where it came from. This is it. So have a conversation about border. We could talk about what's wrong and what to do about it, but let's talk about why it's wrong and what we ought to, as a whole, shoot for. So that just my little color commentary plug there. This is beyond a lot of our grasp, but it's very much something we should embrace more often.
Right.
So,
our ideas have to be rooted, which is why the founders looked back to the ancient Christian and ancient Jewish traditions, going back even to the Old Testament, as well as the Greeks and the Romans. They looked at Cicero and they looked at Aristotle, and our opinions about these things can't just be rooted in headlines, because headlines are not rooted. Those are the most kind of ADHD, schizophrenic way of assessing the world around you, because it's just boom, and then they disappear, and boom, a new one disappear. But these people think about these things, and I think we should too. And that is why I thought it'd be important for us to kind of share these thoughts about what sovereignty really means, because I like in my day-to-day life, I don't sit down to think about this, but today I decided I'm going to sit down to think about this, and I'm going to go look at law journals from 20 years ago and see what they said.
I always won't go down that path. I'm realizing all the things that are encapsulated in that phrase 20 years ago, and it's starting to make me feel a little bit old, and my back starts to hurt a little more. No, I'm kidding. Well, this was part of what's in the news right now is what's happening in New York.
Well, it was in the news 2 weeks ago.
Well, yeah, but I mean, no, it's still it's still in the news. That's why we pick a topic that's important and matters. It's not going to change 2 weeks from now. Well, it may. I don't know. There's all kinds of crazy things that could happen a week and a half from now. Oh, 1 week from now. 2 weeks from now. 1 week from now. What are you thinking that we're recording these a month ahead? You're giving them all these false ideas. But this, the video that's coming out, not just from the southern border, but stuff that's happening in New York City, which is already falling at the seams, it feels like, from domestic criminals. Yeah. Let alone, an invasion of aliens, fill in the blank term that you want, people not here legally that are being shipped from the border all the way up to New York City.
Of whom are primarily men in their
military-aged males. And by the way, we say military-aged males. I know that this phrase gets thrown, and then everyone, don't say that they're not combatant. Military-aged males is a phrase that specifically means typically young men from 18 to 28 or 8. Like it's a descriptive term that we ought to understand. We're not talking about old men, even middle-aged men with families kind of thing. We're talking about young men without families. That's what that means, military-aged males. It's an important distinction. It's a descriptor. Just a side note, because I keep hearing people use that, and then a lot of other people react to it like we're using it to trump up some sort of invasion language, but it's not. It's a descriptive term. Sorry. Side note, soapbox. I'm done with it. But the absolutely crazy stuff that's coming out, which we'll have a couple of links from some videos. If you missed it, I'm sure there's going to be some more updated stuff next week, but still, this is prevalent. New York City, I mean, what is it? I think, didn't Mayor Eric Adams say they're estimated to spend almost $12 billion in 3 years to try to house and take care of these migrants that are being sent to, thank you, sanctuary city policies. This is what $12 billion over 3 years. And there's a homelessness and a drug epidemic of our own people. This is just
can't afford that because we're trying to send it to Ukraine.
Right. And see, this we're getting off into all of the effects of losing our national identity, our national sovereignty, which has nothing to do, and that those things have almost been turned into dirty words now because you start talking about identity. I'm not talking about race. We're talking about the principle, the idea, and the common agreed upon. I've lost all of the words. I'm trying to think of a single word to encompass it, but this idea of what America is. We have all decided that's what we want this place to be. So we agree to a certain standard, a set of rules, the law, and we're all here based upon ideas. And that's the really interesting thing about this conversation with national sovereignty. Get the history of the world. There are, it's really nation states are built more around tribe of ethnicity or language or something. We're all the same people group. So we group up, built around something. And the really, really awesome thing about America is it was not built around any of that. It was built around ideas and an adherence to freedom and liberty. People who want these things, you want to worship freely, you want to speak freely, you want to have a say-so in the political sphere and dissent to, the prevailing that too. Let's all form a nation state together rather than just we happen to live in the same area, we all speak the same language and look the same. So therefore we are a nation. So often how has it happened? This is vital. That's why I think the phrase the American experiment, because it's never been done before in the civic world in all history, is so important, and why it really does bring up why the importance of boundaries, literally the actual boundary of a nation state inside this border we have a set of things that you agree on. Now, visitors come in and out, no problem, but that's not what we're talking about. People just want to free flow in here, and there is no system, but everyone agrees, yes, I would like to be a part of that. Now, once you get in and get into them, okay, I'd like to change and tweak this and this and this, so I'm going to start to get involved in politics. I'm going to run. I'm going to find people who support. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a invasion is the term for it. And then we're footing the bill, and there's utter chaos, and you're kind of suspending the rules and the laws, and we are where we are with some of the stuff that's going down in New York, things that are happening in California, even the stuff that's being foisted upon the Texas border. It's lawlessness, and we are a nation of laws. Those two things don't work together very long. It's oil and water. It's gonna have a major problem, and that's what we're seeing the boiling over point. But if we as conservatives are going to lead the fight to stop this and actually put forward solutions, it is incredibly important we understand all of the fundamentals below it, which is sovereignty and the law itself, which is why we are supposed to be the way that we were and the way that we need to get back to. And you know, we can't just make up new arbitrary rules to try to band-aid the problems. We have to understand build the wall. There's a wall reference for you. You have to understand how to build the foundation of the wall back correctly, not just put a little patch that seems to cook on one spot. No, this is why it was built this way. Let's sit down and rebuild this section correctly. That's kind of the biblical analogy wrapped in there too. But
and to have law as legal theory, I was talking about earlier, was discussing. You need, or was kind of alluding, you need distinction and you need natural order, which are things that the left has been so effective at making people uncomfortable with, because they've gotten so used to, and everybody's the same. But in natural order, you need those for laws to apply at all. Even just to just not a criminal, what is and is not theft, etc. And when you don't have those, you lose it all.
That's true. Man, I think today we're just gonna be a shorter one because this is unauthorized cerebral, go really big. But the interesting thing is, from here it's kind of like we talked about last week. I felt like we're just kind of carpet bombing from 30,000 feet, this big giant subject that goes into so many different directions. But each one of these is a huge conversation to be had. But we need to understand why this matters first, this overarching principle. And as we're watching the news, we talk, with Todd Bensman. Ed talks with Todd on his radio program all the time, on the Pro America Report. Todd talks to us about specifics that are happening in sanctuary cities. We're watching, and we're going to link to specifics that are going on in New York City. But to understand all of these, we need to put on our founding fathers' thinking cap and understand these first principles first, like they did. And gave us the systems, gave us the rule of law, the nation state, the understanding that we have. So if we're going to make America sovereign again, that's our cutesy. We always like to have a cute headline here. If we're going to make America sovereign again, we need to understand what that means and where it comes. It's not just addressing chaos in New York City with migrants from Sudan or Syria. I forget what the big up. They
were from Sudan.
Two buses. Was it two buses from Sudan? If we're going to address that, we all have an emotional reaction and probably a temporary fix. But more and more, as that chaos is very purposefully, and you said it, very purposefully put on us by the left, the neo-Marxists who are destroying the systems like our sovereignty, our border, the physical border. If we're going to understand and fix that, we have to understand the first principles that brought us here, which is, it could go from here to a lot of places.
Yes.
So
it seems that all of.
Well, this is the starting
and this
point.
comes from the last one too. So
exactly,
that's a good thing.
And that's the thing. This is the starting point. I mean, two guys in a library aren't going to fix the world.
Maybe if they put us in charge, we would. But
it's possible. We could certainly do better. We could certainly do better than the people there now. I say that, not all of them, but most of them. That's probably but this conversation is not going to fix everything in America, but we need to be having the conversations and starting them and going back to the right place to understand together as we all regroup and move forward. And I say regroup, I mean it's go time. It's not time for thinking, it's time for action, but we have to be thinkers and doers at the same time. And I hate to use, oh my gosh, I hate to use this from Mike Pence, but building the plane as we're, flying it or as it's taking off. It was a famous COVID thing he said. That though, but I feel like that's kind of where we are, guys. We're going to save America. If we're going to make America sovereign again, if we're going to make the rule of law matter again, you and I have a lot of learning to do, understand these foundational principles, while we also are on the march in action on a political level to fix things now and address things now. But then the permanent solution must be thoughtful and understand. It must go back to why America exists and why the rule of law matters, which predates our nation by a good bit.
Right.
And the more you look at the founding fathers and the more you look at the legal theory of things here in America, you understand that this was based upon very long-standing principles and morals by learned men who weren't necessarily wiser than us, and much more well-rounded, I would argue, average American today, myself included. So I think it's this is an important launching point. I want to go from here. What is there a specific part of sovereignty that we should go down, a specific thing in America, one specific issue that we should talk about? Let us know.
Let us know. We want to know.
Sound off in the comments, in the chat below. Again, we've got one of us is going to be
see them. We will
sitting there responding.
Yeah.
So, where you want to go from here, we'll take notes and we'll do it. But consider this the launch point of probably, I think, a future series of talks about sovereignty. And I told you we were going to talk about a few big issues, overarching issues. Talked about Western civilization. We've got a big thing coming up I'd like to do about nationalism. I'm going to drop that hint here so that you're stuck with it, because I've said so on the air.
I'm excited for that.
But there's some big ones we want to cover, and let this be an installment. And if there needs to be a spider web of issues from here, let us know what you want to talk about. So until then, let's go ahead and cut it off before we go on too many rabbit trails and take too much time. But thanks for being with us. It was a fun one, even if it's just kind of scratching the surface of a big issue. And I'm looking forward to the rest of them. So yeah,
phyllisschlafly.com email list, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Noon, unauthorized caucus time. Make it happen.